Hello and welcome to the Saratoga Springs Planning Commission meeting for April 14th, 2022. I've asked Commissioner Anderson to lead us in the pledge, so I'll turn the time over to him.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Although the Planning Commission are here in presence, so we have a quorum available. From city staff, we have David Stroud from the Planning Department, Nicolette Fike from the City Recorder's Office, Scott Patrick from the Engineering Department, Frederick Donaldson from the Attorney's Office, and Ken Young from our Community Planning Department. First item on the agenda is we always set aside time for any public comment that the public would like to make that's not a public hearing listed on the agenda. So I'll go ahead and open up the mic for that at this time. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes and no minutes. I'll close public comment at this time. And our next agenda is a business item for River's Edge East and West Preliminary Plat located 400 East Crossroads Boulevard. Thompson Earl Company is the applicant, and I believe that's presented by David Stroud.
Commission, this is a request tonight for 2 preliminary plats. The property is, you see here outlined in blue. This is at 400 East and Crossroads on the east side and the west side of each parcel outlined. Oops. Each parcel outlined in blue. The zone is currently RC. Minimum lot size is 30,000 square feet. These parcels are well above that. The anticipated use, now right now, you're just looking at the division of the land. Okay, you're looking at does the lot size meet standards for the RC zone. But just to let you know, the anticipated uses that they will then come back for site plan approval and potentially another plat if they do a condo. They anticipate retail uses. They also anticipate residential above commercial on each of these parcels. This would be the River's Edge West plat. That's a 3.22 acre lot. Again, future retail and residential above. River's Edge East will be a 4.88 acre parcel. Again, future retail, residential above commercial. Fairly straightforward, no issues here. Findings and conditions, staff recommends approval.
Is the applicant here? Would they like to come up and join us? Please state your name and address for the record. The business address is fine.
So Thompson Earl is the entity applying. My name is Bruce Bastian.
Okay. Do you have anything you would like to add to the presentation?
It depends on the questions that you have regarding just the preliminary plat itself. There isn't too much to add, but if there are questions about final land use and conceptual designs, we are prepared to share some of those materials if that's
okay.
Desired.
I will go ahead and open this up to the Planning Commission for comments and questions. Commissioner Kilgore.
Somehow I lost my place. Okay, sorry. This is a excuse me. This is an administrative process that we're doing tonight. So I just always ask, just for the record, is the applicant willing to comply with the conditions in the planning staff packet?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then I did have a question. Oh, here it is. Okay. It's probably for a little bit further down, but I did just want to ask if you felt that there was going to be any issue with along the Jordan River Trail if concrete, since concrete is required for the trail, if there's going to be any issue that you anticipate for that.
We're going to ask for permission to modify that. I know we've talked with David, and that's not permitted per the code, but it's a trail to nowhere right now. And we would love to see a crushed granite or a bark or a pea gravel or some other softer material, because the bike path already goes on the east side. If you look at the master plan trail system for the city of Saratoga Springs, it does not continue the bike path on the west side along the top of the river. It's actually only on the east side, and there's connections, and we can get into a whole presentation on that. We do want to have top of riverbank access and enjoyment and beneficial use for the project and the public, but we think it's a more appropriate, better use to have a softer material than concrete or asphalt at the top of the river. I think it's enjoyable to have a gravel or a sand or a dirt or some other material.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, just although it's probably not required for our action tonight, was what you were planning for the river facing adjacent areas, if you can share that information.
Yeah, I mean, the river is like the greatest amenity of this site, and it's why we're excited about this project. Our partners, the Thompson and the Thompson Earl, they own Western Timber Frame. It's the largest pergola manufacturer in the Western U.S. So we're going to have pergolas, benches, seating, fire pits. I mean, we are going to activate the riverfront. That's part of the plan for the riverfront overlay area that we're in, and we're going to take full advantage. And the design of the residential that's over commercial that you'll see when we come back for site plan approval, we told the architect we don't want to create a project that has residential units that have a view of the river and Mount Timpanogos and Lone Peak, and then units that have a view of the parking lot. So figure out, architect, how do you give every unit a view of the east side? And we're really excited to come back and show you that plan. And architect has done a marvelous job creating what we call a puzzle unit. And it's really neat how they work, but every single unit has views of the east, and we're really embracing the river.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that insight.
You're welcome.
I know it's not required right now. So I guess I just had a question to the staff. It was the concrete trail was highlighted, and it sounds like some discussion needs to happen. But as far as what we want to do tonight, if it doesn't meet all the requirements of the code, then is it something like we do a condition, or?
You would just recommend it, because you're making a recommendation to the city council. It'd be in your recommendation. Yeah, right now, true, the trails master plan does not show the trail on the north side there, perhaps because the city basically ends after this property. There's another parcel up there, but it ends, and Lehigh does not actually have a connection along the river on their property. They peel off before they get down to the border of the two cities. Where it comes into play is it falls into the waterfront buffer overlay, which is a section of the code which does require that trail there.
Right.
It's a conflict in the code. You got one ordinance that says one thing, the master plan says the other. And in those scenarios, we hope that there's some discretion where we can meet the intent of the riverfront, which is to activate the river. But let's use something more appropriate and better beneficial use to the public, I think.
No, I totally agree, but it is clear that if the master plan and the city code conflicts, city code controls, and since it's administrative, if it doesn't meet, then it's not. I don't think it's an issue. I just think that what do we do administratively in order to take care of this? Because everything. I mean, I don't want to hold you guys up just because you had one item that doesn't meet the code, and it's something that you guys want to talk about. So I just wasn't sure administratively how we.
I mean, if we had to do concrete and the council said we're not going to bend, we'll do concrete. We just don't think it's the best use.
Right. No, understood. And again, it's just that's what's in the code. Yeah. So okay, thank you. That's what I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Kilgore. Any other comments or questions from the commission? Commissioner McConkey.
So forgive my little confused brain right now. What's the intent tonight? Is preliminary
plat. You're just looking at the land division. Does the subdivision meet the code for the RC zone? We've got they're dedicating road for the 400 right of way increase in width. Does the lot have the can it meet future setbacks? Obviously, you're 3 to 4 acres on each lot. Does it have the public utility easements? Really, you're just looking at the lots themselves. It's nice to have the background of what the future is.
Sure.
And I contemplated actually keeping that in, because they had it in their plans, but I don't want to get too far down the road and,
Yeah.
maybe something changed. I just want to keep it just succinct to say this is strictly the land division right now.
Okay, I appreciate that. A couple questions. Has there been a geotechnical study on this side already?
Yes.
Promising
Yes,
for the 4-story building?
yes.
Not going to have to go down
And
too
we don't have to do
far?
like, no like mat footings or crazy, I mean, it's not bad.
Okay, that's good. When we start getting up into 3-4 stories, right next to a river, it just gets a little,
I think the city helped us out by making us push the buildings pretty far away from the top of the river.
that's good. There's the area outside of, so looking at the possible site, you're showing a pool possibility, a public pool.
For the use of
residents?
the residents.
Okay. And then on the west side, we're showing gas tanks. Is that gasoline tanks, or is that propane tanks, or natural gas tanks? That what the intent
what's on
is
the-
on that side? Doing a gas, this is an RC zone, right?
Regional commercial, yes.
And there's nothing prohibiting gas.
No.
I'm not a big fan of the gas station right there, by the way. But this is administrative, as was said, right there. Other than, of course, if we're doing propane tanks, there's some, excuse me, setback requirements on the propane, so that's not propane. Okay, I think I'll put my 2 cents in. I'm not a fan of not doing concrete, just because of the longevity and the upkeep and the maintenance. But that's my 2 cents. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McConkey. Any other comments from the commission? So we don't have to just make a recommendation on the trail. That's not a question, correct, David?
I mean, it is a red line. It would be an overall site improvement. You can just call whatever your recommendation, whatever you feel would be appropriate. We just said, correct the red lines. Obviously, as I expand my staff report to the city council, I'll explain what their ask is, why it is. Basically, because it doesn't show the regional trail in the trails master plan. All that means is the city doesn't maintain the surface. On regional trails, the city will maintain the integrity of the surfaces, just not the daily, snow clearance, that sort of thing, landscaping around it. So this would still be a trail required by the buffer overlay, but it's just not a trail that the city would then a regional trail the city would maintain the integrity of.
Okay.
Just to clarify, the buffer overlay asks for asphalt, not concrete. The concrete is in the master plan, which is not including this area.
Okay.
And we would hope that you can have an opinion on the trail after you see the full plan. But it's administrative.
Right. My feeling is we probably do the division and we'll let the city council give us direction if they want to do, that might be the better approach. Commissioner McConkey and then Commissioner Ryan.
Sorry, I had one more question. That road, whatever it's called, 4th East, what are we anticipating for traffic? Is there in the master plan any anticipation of widening that road?
Yeah, if you look back on, that hatched area is right-of-way dedication. The diagonal lines, right-of-way
Oh,
dedication.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, thanks.
And I believe engineering may be able to correct me here, but I think we are matching up to actually Lehigh's road standard.
That's right.
Yeah. So So we have continuity of design, at least on that section.
And we got quite a hill on both sides of that road, right?
Yeah. There is an issue too of that there's been a lot of fill brought in on that ground over the years.
Yeah.
And how we measure building height is from the natural grade. So we're going to have documentation at some point what the natural grade was, because that's where building height is taken from, is that measurement, not the top of the fill.
So that dirt could potentially be coming out.
Not necessarily coming
Although
out.
we're in an RC zone, we've got some height.
Yeah, but not necessarily
allowance.
coming out, but it's how we calculate building height.
Yeah, okay.
Commissioner Ryan.
I just had a follow-up question to Director Stroud's scenario on that trail. Then who's responsible? And it doesn't pertain to this, just for information, just want to understand then in that scenario, who is responsible for
It would be the responsibility of, it'd be an HOA, some sort of association that owns that in kind, but it would have a public access easement on that trail.
Commissioner Kilgore.
Sorry, again, not a pertinent question to the issue, but maybe you just answered and I didn't hear it, but is there a major difference between the Lehigh road standards and ours?
I want to say a couple of feet, 1.5 feet maybe on each side. Do you recall either of Scott or?
Like smaller or bigger?
It's smaller, but I think it's a different curb profile and a
Yeah.
different sidewalk profile. I mean, there's,
Different parks. We just wanted to be a uniform look basically, and just continuity. So we decided to meet their standard on that little section.
Thank you.
But it gives people access to our commercial area. That's the important thing for us. Any other comments from the commission? Go ahead and entertain a motion.
I move to recommend approval to the City Council of the request of preliminary plat approval of the River's Edge East and River's Edge West at 400 East Crossroads Boulevard in the RC zone with the findings and conditions listed in the staff packet.
We have a motion from Commissioner Kilgore. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Ryan with the second. Do we have a question on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, that passes unanimously. Congratulations. Thank you. Next item is Freedom View Cove preliminary plat located 8968 West, 7350 North. Keaton Morton is the applicant. Who is presenting that? Oh,
I am
okay.
Kendall Black.
Kendall,
One of the new
take it away.
We're doing the Freedom View Cove preliminary plat, not amendment, plat. It's just off of 145 north, just north of the lake, right next to the Sunrise Academy.
Okay.
You know where
So
that's at?
is it the address on this wrong? Did I read the wrong address?
It's roughly 18, no, that's about right.
Okay.
5 north, about 1890 east. You see it better there. It's a R110, it's 5.25 acres. It's going to be 16 lots. Average pad size is 10,000 square foot plus. The open space is in compliance, but they don't have enough amenity points. They're required 40 amenity points. They're only about 13,000 or 13.89. So they had proposed a playground, but it didn't fit where they wanted it, so they will do the payment in lieu agreement unless they can figure out a way to find the playground, place for it to work. It's pretty straightforward, meets above what is required for the vegetation. Everything they proposed was drought-tolerant plants, trees. It has the big detention basin right there on the right-hand side. There's some park benches along the, benches along the way, along the trail for people to stop at. Really, that's about everything I have. We recommend approval, positive recommendation, I guess.
Is the applicant here this evening? Would you like to come up?
I haven't met him yet, so talk to him on the phone a lot.
Come on up and introduce yourself and give, state your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, Keaton Morton, 11219 South Crescent Oak Way, Sandy, Utah. Yeah, so I did the development just to the east of this as well. And then Drywood Meadows, that's kitty corner to this. So staff's been great to work with. So I'm just, yeah, it's been going pretty well.
Okay. I'll go ahead and turn this over to the Planning Commission for questions and comments. Commissioner McConkey.
On the staff report, there was, I believe that the location on that first page says 86 McGregor Lane. I'm guessing that that's an error, correct?
Yeah, that would definitely be a error.
Since McGregor Lane is on the other city. I tried to send an email, but I don't think I pushed send
Oh,
a few days ago, last weekend, so.
that happens.
I've got a couple notes here, and they don't mean a lot to me anymore because I haven't looked at this in a few days. 19.11 general standards on page 40 says the findings mentions lamp color. Is this an intentional? What is lamp color? Like green, blue?
Well, no, it's the brightness. So the
Oh, is it?
4000K is a certain brightness.
Okay.
And so if it's higher than that, it's too bright, more bright than the
Right.
code allows for.
Okay.
So that's all that is.
And then the findings on page 44 under the subdivision layout regarding having only one access point. I'm assuming this cul-de-sac isn't near deep enough to require fire sprinklers in the home, correct?
Scott will take that one.
This is an unusual layout. This is a bit longer than we generally approve, but we don't have any access to the rear, so
Right.
it was worked out with the fire chief to make sure that he was accepting what was provided, so everything's been gone through the fire chief.
Okay. Those were my only questions I had. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner McConkey. Commissioner Kilgore.
So again, it's administrative. This is just for a CYA for myself, just in case someone ever asks. Is the applicant willing to comply with all the conditions in the staff, in the city staff packet?
Yeah.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. So I had a few questions here. Sorry, my paging is based on the old main packet. Okay, so there's just a number of does not complies in the packet. So I just want to go over a couple of those, just make sure that you either intend to comply or there's some negotiation going on. Again, because this is administrative, and I don't want to just pass on something that says does not comply. So like fencing and tree base clearance doesn't comply. Any issues with correcting those?
No,
How about rock mulch doesn't comply?
no.
Okay. Required landscaping doesn't comply. Do you expect this to be corrected as well?
Yep.
Okay. And then, I guess maybe you mentioned this already, Commissioner McConkey, but mine says lamp bulb non-compliance. Can this be corrected as well?
The what? Sorry, say that again?
Lamp bulb.
Yeah, that'll be, yep.
Okay. Says that the standard plat format is missing items like location dimensions and labeling of roads and other structures and amenities. It doesn't comply. And proposed fencing doesn't comply. Can these be corrected as well?
Yep.
Okay. Some of the same issues on following pages as well. Is there an issue with paying I think it said, rollback taxes before recordation? Do you anticipate any issues with that?
No.
Okay.
And we've already I did submit, so I got these comments back. We've already just resubmitted, just today, actually.
Oh, okay.
Answering all of these.
Great.
All of these red lines, yep.
Well, then I guess I'm just confirming then, because
No, you're good.
going off of the old packet.
Yep,
so-
you're
okay.
good.
All right, terrific. I'm glad. And then how will the applicant address correcting noncompliance with minimum percentage by development? If you don't know what that is, I don't either.
Does that have to do with the landscaping part?
Let me make sure.
Because I know the landscaping thing's a little screwy. On one part, they have exactly what they need. On another part, it doesn't shoot them down. How did you explain that to me, Dave?
Yeah, it has to do.
Something to do with the open space, but they're good with the open space. They're just short on the amenity.
Okay, terrific, okay. And then, please address what's proposed to correct the total cost issue for payment in lieu of open space. And that's on the next page. It was highlighted, under the section payment in lieu of open space. There's a section that says total cost. It's all in red and it's highlighted, and that's why I wanted to bring attention to it. It says stuff like, the city shall maintain, it says here 40 amenity, this is the amenity point stuff. Okay, so that's been more or less, that's been addressed then.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and that'll get more addressed before city council and then for the final plat.
Okay. What happens then if the playground can't be moved? Will there be a new payment in lieu of agreement to be drawn up? Because right now, it's based on the playground being where it is, but if it's moved, then it changes everything.
Yeah, so one of the conditions actually says if they're not able to get that, they'll pay the full payment minus the benches that they're providing.
Okay,
So it's already in the conditions, and then we'll redraft one. It's just a matter of changing a couple numbers.
okay, so a new agreement will be drawn up in that case, okay. And then, this is just more a question on my part. The trail crosses the street, and I was just wondering, is there going to be a crosswalk or any safety measures there?
Like ADA ramps and such?
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. And so I guess, will there be striping or something, like a crosswalk or?
On the ADA ramps, it's going to be a commercial drive approach because of the situation with the depth. So since we don't have the additional access points, they're required to have the commercial drive approach. So the sidewalk's not going to dip down into the street. It's going to just be straight across.
Okay.
So it shouldn't require any truncated domes or anything like that.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's it for me, thank you. Thanks for answering all those questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Kilgore. Any other comments or questions from the commission? Commissioner Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, I appreciate the application and the work from the city staff on updating that. It's nice to know, because there was a lot of red and highlighted things on this, so it's nice to see that seems as if a lot of that has been addressed. I just had a quick question and a reminder. If we could go back to the map, I'm trying to spark my memory because I haven't been down the road in a little while, and I know that the charter school is there to the west, and then the whole idea of why we're allowing this to take shape as it is because of the access and what's happening around. What is happening to the north of the property to prevent access?
It's Lehigh or it's Utah County property? So we can't
It's owned by Lehigh?
believe so.
No, it's not, it's just in the county,
Oh,
but
county.
it's designated to go into Lehigh's. That's kind of like, that's the designation. It's like the very boundary for where Saratoga turns into Lehigh.
Okay.
Yep.
Then to the east, what's the story on that piece of property?
That's R110. It's already residential. It's a
that's built
division.
out.
Do we know what the owner plans to do with that at this time?
No, it's already built.
Oh, it's already built right there?
Uh-huh.
Okay. I guess I need to go down that road more often. All right, those are the only questions I had. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Commissioner Anderson, Commissioner McConkey.
That was one of the challenges is the subdivision on the east is built, but they didn't stub any access into that property.
Yeah.
Correct. So out of curiosity, do we know what the maximum length of a dead-end road is in our code? Or is it based on the fire code?
It's based on the fire code. I can't remember exactly right off, but 660's kind of come to mind, but I think I might be confusing it with the access
That's
distance.
okay.
So it's,
Yeah, the school kind of threw a wrench in road alignment when they came through, because they're obviously not going to run access through school, so.
Yeah. I mean, the alternative would be to have a really big lot in the back, I guess, huh? Or something. Okay. Kind of stuck on that one.
Yeah.
Unless we somehow annex that land to the north and make that part of the whole development. That's not a bad idea.
I love that.
That's all I'm going to say about that.
Commissioner Anderson.
These residents to the east, they were noticed for this item? Is that correct?
You know,
Okay.
plats don't require a notice.
Okay. I guess my question is, in other locations within the city, right near schools, we have challenges with the residents and parking, and being that it's got one access and it sits next to a school, right? Like, are we creating I guess the answer is yes. You don't have to answer that. I feel like we're going to create a challenge there, a pain point there. And I'm just curious if there's been any feedback that's come from residents regarding it.
Being residents next to a school
No,
of issues?
well, I know that they're not there yet. I'm just wondering, yeah. I'm just curious what the traffic is currently around the school now and what that will do to this residential area once it comes in. And will create a,
I mean, engineering can speak better to traffic, but I'll just put, you know, my thoughts in. Obviously, at some point, you know, any development coming in here on 145, we're anticipating the increase in the width, and we're getting that, at least the right-of-way obtained at that time. Whether they go in or not may be different, but at some point, yeah, we're expecting a much wider road here, which at that time, yeah, will probably be better for, you know, in the case of the school, the access and the backing up of traffic. We've heard, yes, traffic does back up at times here at the school.
and just the parking, right? You got parents who are going to look for another place to park around the corner in that cul-de-sac.
I think any school you look at,
Yeah, it
you
does
could
that.
probably say in the morning and afternoon at 3 o'clock, there's probably an issue with traffic at every school. Don't know how to get around that, honestly.
Any other comments from the commission? I will entertain a motion.
I'll make that. I move that the Planning Commission for a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the Freedom View Cove preliminary plat located at 8968 West, 7350 North, 155 North, whatever, right, based upon the findings and conditions in the staff report.
We have a motion from Commissioner Barton. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Commissioner McConkey. Do we have a question on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. That passes unanimously. Congratulations. Okay, the next item is a public hearing on Title 19 City Code Amendment, Chapter 19.20, Internal Accessory Dwelling Unit, ADUs, city initiated. Ken Young is presenting that for us this evening.
Oh, okay. All right, Commissioners, we are back on the IADU issue. So if you'll recall, just do a real quick briefing on the background here. So last year, the state mandated that cities allow for, in certain methods, accessory dwelling units, or specifically internal accessory dwelling units, and gave the cities opportunity to exempt out 25% of their residential areas where that requirement would not be in effect. The City Council chose last fall to adopt this map that you see on your screen, which has, by yellow designation, pulled out those areas that were exempt, or in other words, IEDUs are prohibited in those areas. The methodology used to create this map was that, and it was suggested early on in the process as we were attacking this, that we contact the HOAs and find out what was their pleasure. Do they want to permit or not permit? And there was quite a vast array of different responses, some mixed and such. So, but this is what ultimately was approved. I don't think the City Council, they were trying to meet a deadline that was established by the state to put something into effect. They quickly let us know that they weren't happy with this. This was not the final product, and started giving us some feedback for how we might amend the map and the ordinance a little bit to be a little bit more in line with what they wanted. And so I'll explain what we came up with here. The new map identifies different areas, colored in different areas, with the red being all of those currently developed residential areas in the city, or shall I say those properties, those parcels that are residential and that are developed. So what we've taken out of that calculation are roadways, parks, open space, schools, churches, easements, anything that is not actually a residentially used property that may be within those areas, but are not actually residentially used properties or developed properties. So the red represents the actual residential properties. The black or the dark gray represents those that are in those areas that are used for something else. The green, the light green, represents areas that are zoned for residential, not currently developed. The dark green, there's only a few areas there. You'll see in Beacon Point around the temple, and another area identified in the Fox Hills, Saratoga villages at Saratoga area who have requested, yet we are waiting for an official request from them. So this could be amended before it gets to City Council, but we're anticipating it, so that's what we put in. These are the areas in dark green which are developed currently or developing that are being permitted for IADUs. Already the Beacon Point area had built into their community plan that provision. So that was already set up that way. And then, as mentioned, the Fox Hills HOA, we are anticipating a request, an official request. Now, with that, we have, I will bring it up here in just a minute, address that in the ordinance, how one or how an HOA or neighborhood might request being in or out of the prohibited or approved areas. So any questions with how the map looks or functions at that point? Yeah, we can come back to it, but I'll...
Could I get the clarification? So the red areas are just where the residential properties are, but they have not opted in or out of the...
So the direction we got from City Council is all currently developed properties, we want to have them prohibited, or in other words, exempted, as if we use the state's language.
So then...
So that anything that's currently built can't do it. Anything that will be built will have that opportunity. They're trying to maximize the development scenario in the city so that we have already planned and built according to our single-family residential guidelines and standards, so that the concern was if we get too many of these homes with IADUs in a neighborhood, then we essentially have a lot of duplexes and we have increased the density in that neighborhood. And we didn't really plan for that as far as utilities, infrastructure, all of that. And so the concern was maybe we better exempt out all of our currently developed properties and not worry about what HOA wants this or that, at least at this point, without them officially requesting something. Let's just put it across the board. Everybody that's built now will be prohibited to have an IADU unless otherwise designated. And then all future properties that are not currently developed, or in other words, the light green areas, or yellow, which are outside of the boundaries that are land use designated for residential, will have that opportunity to...
So we no longer have a 25%.
I'm sorry?
So we no longer have a 25% cutoff then?
Well, we are permitted to have up to 25%. And what we've done by designating these properties and pulling out the churches, the parks, the open spaces and all that, we have found out that we've got, 17%. If we look at just the red properties, those are 17% of the community, of the residential properties in the community. So we have 8% left to play with if we want to.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
clarifying question. That's 17% of the eligible residential properties, so we've exempted out the
Of residential
townhomes
properties in
or
the
just
community.
of the overall residential, okay?
Right. And that was according to state language, that we could exempt out 25% of our residential properties.
So part of that 17% are townhomes, is
Yes.
that correct? And any of those other
They,
properties?
they wouldn't otherwise be eligible, but
Right.
they're included in the overall.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Commissioner Burns.
Is this push coming from the state to clarify this, or is this coming from city council? I'm kind of unclear.
This is a direction from city council to, the idea was, we're not quite sure what the best method is for us to achieve our 25%. There was a little bit of pushback or feeling that we don't really like that the state is making us do this. But if we have to do something, then let's try to exempt out as much as we can. Let's put in as much as we can in that 25% exempted area. And so trying to find a fair method of doing that, initially we went to the HOAs, and we ended up getting some complaints and misunderstandings there, so we determined maybe that's not the best way to do this. So then it was just, okay, let's just do everything across the board. If it's currently developed, it's exempted. If it's not developed, there's opportunity.
So the original plan that was passed on that deadline, the state was okay with that, or did they have any concerns with
I
that?
don't know that we've received any feedback from the state. I know that they were looking for us to pass an ordinance, and I think that they at least were notified that we did pass our ordinance, but I'm not sure if they have any IADU state police going through and checking it all yet. You know, we may hear more from the state as things get fleshed out, but at this point, we haven't heard from them.
Thank you.
So I will review with you the proposed ordinance amendments here.
They're just, maybe for the sake of Commissioner Sprotsy-Burns, there's a concern, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a concern of how the city went about choosing which areas, right? It became controversial. And so I think that the effort that's being made, while I'll have a few comments here in a minute, I think it was a great direction to resolve that anyway. Thanks.
Okay. So we did pass an ordinance that put in our standards and our guidelines for if we were to have an IADU, what would be required. And so we have that ordinance in place, but what we were given direction for was how a person or a group or an HOA, a neighborhood, would go about requesting amendments to this map. If we want to add in or take out any particular area. So on this, we're looking at section 1920 and subsection 04 for permitted locations. And we just made a couple of small verbiage corrections in that one, just in regards to prohibited and approved locations. I won't get into that too much unless you have a question there. But added to that is our map amendment process. So I'll just read through it and you tell me if you have any questions. Map amendment process. Amendments to the map, including the addition or removal of a neighborhood or residential subdivision to or from areas designated as IADU prohibited, may be approved following the submittal of an application by either I, the board of a homeowners association representing the area of the request. Applicant shall attach a copy of the official approved minutes of a board meeting where a majority voted to support the request, or I, a representative of a non-HOA neighborhood defined by a residential subdivision plat or plats. Applicant shall attach a signed petition or other document or documents of official certification representing at least 66% of the homeowners in the neighborhood in support of the request. That was basically following direction from the council. They wanted to see something to that effect.
From the council?
Super majority, they wanted.
For majority? I figured.
Yep.
Commissioner Ryan.
When do you want us to ask questions? Do you want to go through the rest of this, or, because I have a couple?
I'm done now with my presentation, So any-
We need to, this is a public hearing, so open that up for the public.
Okay.
And I'll turn it open for the free-for-all.
I'll demur. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll wait.
Okay, so now that we're done with the presentation, this is a public hearing, so I'll open this up for public to make any comments or ask any questions that they have. All right, as there is no public to make comment, we will close the public comment, and I'll open this up for the commission. Commissioner Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of quick questions. So I just want to state that I appreciate the work that's been done here. Like I believe at the time when we were considering this as well, getting input, I felt this is a more appropriate way to go for the residents of the city. So HOAs can fail their residents at times, and speaking from experience with my own, and felt like this is a better approach from the city. So thanks for the work that's been done on this. I really appreciate it. I think it's a good way to go. I think it meets expectations of people who moved into certain neighborhoods, believe they would continue to have that sort of quality of life and structure in that neighborhood. So I like it. I like that it gives us flexibility. Still, there's some percentage, as we discussed a little bit earlier, that things can change. And then also we now are hashing out some of the language around what that process looks like, if I'm correct so far. So a couple of quick questions that I did have on, we're talking about a non-HOA neighborhood. When we have an HOA neighborhood, I think it's a little easier to define what that neighborhood is, because most likely folks in that HOA are paying some sort of dues and they understand that they're part of that neighborhood, right? When we're talking about a non-HOA neighborhood, what happens if Bob on this side of the street believes he's truly part of that non-HOA neighborhood, but Bob is not part of that HOA? Bob signs and says, yeah, I really want to have this change take place. What does the vetting process look like on the part of the city to determine, the check and balance, to say, truly that the 66% majority, which I think is a number that's fine, but that these are actual people and what we would delineate as that neighborhood? Does that make sense?
Right. So the verbiage that we've added in here, that 60, let's see, defined by a residential subdivision plat or plats, that would be the neighborhood. So they would need to submit a plat or refer to which plat they are working with their request. And so we would go and look at that plat and make sure whoever has signed is actually within that platted neighborhood. So that's where we'd come up.
Excellent. Okay, so there would be at least a check and a balance process in place from the city to handle that. Okay. And then the next thing I had a question on B with the fire marshal approval. Can you give me some examples of where the fire marshal, where we're under the old standards, which we address here in item 2, where we says, hey, if you're in a new area, you may be required to do all these additional steps, right, to have this possible in these neighborhoods. So I'm guessing if an old neighborhood comes that doesn't have all those things in place, this is why we have the language around the city fire marshal. But what is the instance where the fire marshal does or does not say yes, yay or nay, and how do we avoid, from the city's perspective, an arbitrary nature to it? So one day the fire marshal's very happy, he just had his birthday, he's feeling great, and he says yes, and the next day he says, his wife divorced him, his dog dies, and he's out of beer, and he's really upset, and he says no. Does that make sense? So I want to make sure that we have in place the right, again, talking about checks and balances and the right procedures and steps, so that the fire marshal can follow those and we don't have an arbitrary nature to it. And then also, I'm trying to figure out in a situation where we don't have all these things in place with the wider roads, the increased capacity for the sewer and the water, all these things that we want from the newer neighborhoods, why would the fire marshal ever approve an old neighborhood that doesn't have any of that?
Well, various neighborhoods are developed to different standards or may have various access issues or things. No neighborhood is, or not all neighborhoods are the same. So that's why we would want to have them look at that. I would imagine that there would be a set of criteria that the fire marshal is going to use. Exactly what those are at this time, I don't think we were prepared, or neither was the fire marshal prepared to do that, because we haven't been in this arena yet. And perhaps we will look at amending the code later if we feel that there's a need there. I think we have enough confidence in our fire department and fire marshal to be able to come up with some good established criteria and use those in vetting the application if there's need for further review or further requirements. That's about all I can say without having the fire marshal here himself to answer that question. But I think we at least determined there is a need for that review to occur, and that recommendation one way or the other. So, yeah, I think there could be different circumstances in different neighborhoods that may or may not qualify for approval, so.
I appreciate that, and with this, again, I'm very much in favor. I just feel like we can flesh out a bit more, and I would highly recommend sometime or some point in the process that does take place, that there are set guidelines and/or criteria so that an applicant knows, what the fire marshal is looking for and how those things are weighted, or how we're making those judgment calls versus just, the arbitrary nature of a good day or a bad day. And again, I know I'm simplifying that into, the lowest common denominator in that regard. I don't believe those awful things are going to happen to our fire marshal, but you never know. And I just want to make sure that the city is protecting itself against, any potential neighborhood coming back at the city for one reason or another. Thank you.
Fred Donaldson, go ahead. You had some comments.
Yeah, as I recall, Ken, and correct me if I'm wrong, the council was concerned about this too, and they're the ones who kind of gave us some guidance to, to give the fire marshal input on those areas. Is that right?
I don't recall if they mentioned specifically fire marshal. They may have. But
I think they were concerned, though, about parking density and about road widths and sewer capacity, some of those other issues.
Yeah, so
So
number
that's-
2, letter A,
Yeah.
and I didn't read that earlier, I apologize, but that one was basically following the desires of city council that we have that opportunity to add additional requirements. Again, it's going to depend on the individual neighborhood and the needs that are determined for that neighborhood.
And I just wanted to add that the fire marshal will have to have a reasonable basis for whatever decision he makes. So you're right, it exposes us to a potential claim for arbitrariness, but he will have to articulate a reason. So.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. I appreciate as well, Ken, the work on that. And I think that is certainly true, right? And so I think if we can, as long as we can arm the fire marshal with those things that he can point to, because what's reasonable in my mind may not be reasonable in your mind, particularly when you're talking about neighborhoods who may be fired up one way or another. So as much as we can provide that set of standards and that guidance to the fire marshal, I think we're that much better.
Yeah, and I think he may have some of that guidance in the fire code too, where a lot of these neighborhoods were developed with certain density in mind. And again, going back to what Ken said, converting every home in a neighborhood to basically a duplex increases that density. And so I think that's something that he will be able to figure out a little bit. So,
Commissioner Kilgore and then Commissioner McConkey.
Sorry. I still haven't gotten how to do this. So I know that the state has forced our city's hand in having to quickly come up with these with code changes and things, and I just wish we're right now in 2022, and all the majority of the homes that will be in Saratoga Springs have not yet been built. Because our population, you see some of the projections, is going to be 150,000 in 50 years or whatever it is, which means it's going to be more than all the houses that we have today. It's going to be more than that's coming. And here we are already deciding that there's only 8% left that can choose not to put in the dwelling units. And so it's too bad that we're deciding here in 2022 for the majority who haven't even come yet. And I just wonder if developers are aware of that there's only 8% left. For those who have an opinion one way or the other, my guess is probably not, because there's really no way for them to know. And it's really just too bad. But I do think that because you've added these ways to amend the map and the code, that at least that gives some chance of making those changes to try to fit what happens in the future. Mm-hmm. So that's why, what else can we do, based on what the state's requiring? But yeah, I just feel like I just want to register that it's just really too bad that we're deciding today for all the people that are going to come that are even more than what we have today. But But anyway, I guess we're doing what we can to try to somehow mitigate that or try to address that.
Okay, we have Commissioner McConkey and then Commissioner Ryan and then Commissioner Burns. Commissioner McConkey.
Commissioner Ryan, did you have a follow-up comment? Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to get a clarification from Commissioner Kilgore's comment. So if we go back to the map, if we could scroll back to that, doesn't the map, so I want to understand the percentage in the map. So right now, we're already saying all these bright green areas that have yet to be developed where a lot of these houses and developments are coming. Those are in the clear right now and accounted for in the 17%. Is that correct?
No, they're not in the 17%. They're in the 75%.
That's what I mean, is that they're already, meaning that we still have the 8%,
Yes.
even with all of these. So all of these are still wide open, meaning that the I want to say the other thing of contraception, but I won't.
IAD.
Yeah, IAD, right. We're already accounting for that, I guess is my point to Commissioner Kilgore's comment, is that all these places that have yet to be built, we still, in addition to allowing them all, which is what we're basically forced into doing now with this law that's been passed by the legislature, they're all in, and yet we still have an additional 8% on top of that. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we're not precluding, I guess my point
Just
is.
to clarify, when you say they're all in, they are, Ken, it's my understanding, IADUs are allowed. Is that correct?
Green
In
area.
all of the green and yellow areas.
People can say no.
They are allowed, they are not
Your
prohibited.
concern is only 8.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're just, let's try to get that on the record, just to make sure Commissioner Kilgore that I understand. So your concern is that of these green, if they want to come back at some point, there's only 8% more that they can say no to. Okay.
And there's more of them than there are today.
So I have.
Great,
I have
okay,
a
thank you, I
thought
appreciate it.
about this that I'm hoping will help. So let me share some thoughts on this. As a former contractor and business owner, to me, and a little bit of buzz that I hear, this is an amazing business opportunity, because now I can build a development and I can sell, instead of selling the house for, today's market, 700,000, I can sell it for $1 million because it has an IADU and they can rent it out. And so we're looking at, thanks to those on the state level, that I feel like they gave us a mud puddle and we needed to figure out how to step in it. And no matter how we stepped in it, we still stepped in it. So now we're wiping it off and having to go back and try to maybe shift things a little bit. And so, so one of my underlying concerns, of course, is with all the new developments, how can we as residents, as a city, prevent this mentality of the landowners from suddenly capitalizing on this opportunity, if you will? And so looking at the existing, first of all, I really appreciate all the attention that's gone into this, because I mean, this is just like, how do you figure it out? I don't even know. But looking at the HOAs, I think there's a really easy solution, and I completely agree with what's been done there, and taking that strategy. Looking at the non-HOA neighborhoods, I feel like taking the stance that basically we've provided what some people may see as a benefit, and then now we're taking it away. In order to get it back again, you got to have 2/3 majority. I'm not feeling comfortable with that. I don't live in an HOA. I don't want to live in an HOA, and I love the freedoms of not living in an HOA for me. I also recognize that in my subdivision we have a aging population, and one of the affordabilities of staying in the home, and as well as some security, extra security, if you will. There's desires to rent out the apartment, get a little bit more on the fixed, to supplement the fixed income and so forth. Rather than what my proposal would be on the non-HOA subdivisions, based probably, in my mind, based on street widths, If the street widths are wide enough, then I feel like it might be more reasonable to, well, I'd like to leave my subdivision on the list of IADU approved. That's what I would like to do. I don't have an IADU. I don't have an intention of, however, looking at the population of my neighbors and what's going on, I think that it might be in the best interest, of my opinion, and it might also help to facilitate some registration of some IADUs. But I also am looking at this, if we can retain that IADU approved status in at least some of the current non-HOA subdivisions, that gives us the ability to limit other areas. Let's say, for example, and I'm not suggesting this is just for the sake of conversation. Let's say that we as a city decide that we don't want any IADUs in that southern half of DAI's, development, because we want to maintain that as single-family dwellings. I think that gives us the ability to avoid that, strategic mentality of building and selling as, each house has an IADU in it. If that makes sense. So what I'm proposing is taking a strategy something similar to retaining, and I'm just going to speak in generalities, retaining the non-HOA subdivisions that have the appropriate street widths in the IADU approved status. However, if the state allows, that we would require a process to get resident approval. Let's say, for example, if someone wants an IADU, that they need to get, 66% of their neighbors within 600 foot radius, as an example. I don't know if that would mess with the status with the state legally. I don't know, but at least the subdivision, does that make sense what I'm saying? The subdivision would be the IADU approved. However, in order to get your IADU, you need at least 66% of your neighbors within a 600-foot radius. Would that be too controversial?
Well, whether it's controversial or not, it would be very complicated to track. So we'd have to constantly, depending on how many come through. And let me just preface this. My forecast is this community, as well as all of the communities I've been involved with, and what I forecast for the state is that IADUs is a minor component of housing elements that either are or will be into the future. It's just one of the tools in the toolbox that the state's trying to use for moderate income housing. Historically, in other areas, unless they have been absolutely mandated everywhere, like in places in California, they're doing that, mandating the permissibility of them everywhere. There's a small percentage of the population who actually take advantage of that. Most people who buy a single-family home haven't done it with the thought in mind that they're going to turn their home into a duplex. Some may, and there are a few, yes. And a lot of them that are already there have done it outside of legality, and that will continue to happen. But I don't see an onslaught of a lot of new developments that want accessory dwelling units. I could be wrong. That's my personal forecast based on my experience. But my concern is when we're saying if streets are wide enough, well, we would have to determine what exactly are we talking about there. But then is that the only concern? What are the impacts and the issues that we need to look at with IAD? If in that case, we had a neighborhood that was being overrun by homes with IADUs, what would be the impacts that we'd need to be concerned about? It wouldn't be just the street width, it would be the infrastructure, the utilities and all that. And we know, those developed neighborhoods would require a lot of major expense and effort to retrofit some of the infrastructure in those areas. So it may not be just the width of the road that we would be concerned about. So I suppose that's why it's easier for us to take a clean slate on new developments and say, okay, if we're concerned that we might get a lot of IADUs here, well, then we can plan it out for wider streets and more capacity infrastructure and, whatever else we determine. But at this point, to pick and choose and just say, well, one house is going to be good in this neighborhood, and how much impact is that one house going to have, and how do we, I don't know, I just...
Well, and I'm not suggesting just the one house, but let's say for example, that I decided to register for an IADU. Then, as a possibility, what the process could be is that at least 2/3 of my neighbors within the 600 square foot radius would not be opposed to having an IADU in the subdivision. And again, this is just in the existing subdivisions that are non-HOA. Mm-hmm. It's difficult for me to feel comfortable with a representative. I live in Jacobs Ranch. I don't know who would be a representative. I mean, I guess they could go around and get a bunch of signatures for everyone, but that kind of, I don't know if that fits well in a non-HOA environment, if that makes sense. So what I'm uncomfortable with is we've provided a status and the ability based on both state law and the best strategy that we could come up with in the beginning, and then to pull that status and reverse it in a non-HOA environment, I'm not comfortable with, because now it's the city council making the decision for that neighborhood, and possibly as an alternative, what might need to happen would be that 2/3 of the non-HOA subdivisions would vote to become non-IADU subdivisions. Does that make sense?
Well, I think what we
A lot
need,
of questions and complications there.
Yeah.
what I think we need to do is we have a proposal here that the city council's asked for. We need to take what's here, make a positive or negative recommendation, and then let the city council determine if they need to go back, we need to go back to the drawing board or not. Commissioner Burns has been waiting for a long time, so I'm going to let her have a turn, and then I'll let Ken have a turn.
Okay, so this isn't the only city code on IADU, right? There's additional code.
Well, this section, there's a chapter, 1920 is the chapter, but there wasn't anything that was being amended that we were considering tonight in the rest of the chapter.
Okay. And then, so on the section where it talks about if the street is too small, is that a city thing, or is that a state thing?
It would be our determination, so looking at the verbiage. So on 2A there, talking about those, the IADUs may be required to provide for any or all of the following: 1, wider roads with widths up to the maximum permitted under Utah State Code. So Utah State Code does have a maximum width that cities can require in their residential areas. So we would be able to do anything currently, and I'm not sure what those numbers are right now, but currently I do know we're under the maximum that the state provides for. So we would have a little bit of leeway to work with there. And there would be, this is just really generic in how we're saying what could happen. How exactly that happens, who are the determiners on that, you know, that's a process we're going to have to go through. And I'm certain it will involve Public Works and fire department, you know, perhaps police. There would be a lot of heads looking at it to determine, do we need to require more?
Okay. And so then on the map that you guys put so much work into, and I do also just want to say thank you for that, are the properties that are blacked out or redded out, are those gone through individually for lot sizes that are already too small?
No, so what we've done is highlighted the ones that are currently would be eligible, otherwise eligible
Okay.
for an IEDU. So if it's under 6,000 square feet, it's not counted. If it's a townhome, it's not counted. That would
Okay.
be in the black area.
So the new development that we were just talking about a minute ago, the Freedom View Cove, so that one, since it's a new development going in, it could potentially have IADUs, right?
Well, yeah, so that one currently is identified as non-developed.
Yeah, it's shaded in green there. up
Okay,
there.
so, but all of their lot sizes are under the requirement for the allowable lot size.
Yeah, so there can be residential properties in the green and yellow areas that we're saying it's opportunity there, but they otherwise have to meet the requirements we've got already stipulated in the code, one of which is the 6,000 square foot minimum lot size.
Okay, so all of this green area there is a potential for having an IAD. It depends really still on what the developer brings in.
Exactly.
So are we going to run into an issue down the road with the state where we say, well, these are the areas we said could have the IADUs, but we pre-planned that knowing that all of this area isn't going to actually qualify?
Well, the state isn't telling us how much property we have to set aside to allow for them in the future.
Okay.
They're just saying how much we can pull out right now.
Okay. Okay. So then a new development that's coming in where the lot size is big enough and they would qualify, at that point, that's when that section 2, where the city would say, okay, now you have to, if you're building these lots that are bigger or that would allow you to qualify, now you have to meet these additional standards to make it so that if you do, or if someone does put an IADU in.
There will be a determination point with new developments, yes.
Okay.
If they put on their plat, no IADUs will be built in this area, then we wouldn't have a concern for larger. But if we felt like there was the potential for them to do that, or if they expressed the desire to have an IADU home neighborhood, which I suppose is a possibility, I'm not sure that that we'll actually see that, but we can deal with each development proposal as it comes forward.
So if a developer came in and said, we have we have this, we're putting these houses in here, lots are big enough, we meet the other requirements, then at that point, it would be determined, do they need the extra sewer, all of that? But the developer could say, no, we're never going to allow IAD here and not have to do that? How would the developer do that if the city already determined that area?
Well, the city
qualified?
is not saying you have to have an IAD. There's just an opportunity for you to have one there. But the developer could choose on their own to say, no, we're not going to. And we'll put that on the plat. Put it on a deed restriction.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Fred, but I thought the state said that developers and HOAs being formed from when they passed the law, they can't exempt themselves from IADUs anymore. So if that's going to be built, then they're basically eligible.
I think what Ken is saying is that they would be added to the percentage
Of allowed.
of exempted areas.
Oh, if they, okay.
If they put that note on their plat, as long as there's that allowance still.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as we
Is
have
that what you were saying, Ken?
That's what I meant to say, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Can I just clarify that? So if a developer says, sorry, and it's probably just slow tonight, but if a developer says then, okay, well, we don't want to put IADUs in here, then they would have to check if there's room on our map, on our 25% to make sure they're excluded. But if there's no room left, if our 25% is gone, then they would have to put the bigger sewer and water capacity in.
If they're
I'm
allowed.
not saying they would
ADUs.
have to. A determination in the be made. So I guess what I'm saying is we may decide that, okay, any and all future developments that are in the yellow and green areas, we're just going to institute a higher development standard on all of them. And then 5 years down the road, we see that, we don't really need this. And, so I think, or maybe we need it on this hill because of the access or whatever, but on this property over here, it's not needed. So for us to say it's going to be required of every single, I don't see that happening. But, we're in gray area here. We'll see what happens down the road.
Yeah, and I definitely understand that. This is a mess that we're left trying to figure out how to handle. But I feel like it is on that, especially on that section 2, I feel like we're leaving ourselves open to a problem if we don't have a standard set in there. Like if the point of this is to say, hey, these are the rules we're going to set and follow, but then we say, oh, but we'll decide as it comes up, and then we're deciding as it comes up if we think there might be an IDU that comes in, we're kind of just guessing at all of that and not really doing our citizens what we've said of making sure that we're set up and ready for the sewer and ready for that. And if the state is saying we have to allow it, but then we're not forcing the developers to put it in when it should, when they develop correctly, I think we're leaving a lot of mess that will have to be cleaned up later by someone else. Does that make sense? So, I mean, to me, if I was going to approve this code, I would say that section 2 needs to have a little bit stronger verbiage in that it's not if you meet the requirements that are set, the current requirements, whatever those are, that the developer will build to the standard that allows for an IADU.
Well, and to do that, we'd have to go back and do some very detailed studies to determine what exactly is that. What is our projected impact with IADUs? I don't know if anybody can say that. Is it going to be 2 homes in a neighborhood of 50 homes? Is it going to be 35 of those 50? I don't think we know that at this time. And what is the impact in relation to homes or properties or developments that have 6,000 to 10,000 square foot lots versus 12 to 15,000 square foot lots? And so I think there's going to be required a lot of detailed engineering analysis to determine what exactly should be the requirement for this neighborhood versus that neighborhood. And I just think we're not there yet.
I agree with you.
So we either don't do this at all, or we take this as a first step.
I'm done, sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner Kilgore, and then Commissioner Ryan, and then Commissioner Barton.
And that's exactly the comments I want to make, because I was thinking that technically, once we've decided where the 75% is, because let's say in the next 5 years, the 8% is used up, the ones that can say no. That means there's 75% of the areas that can't say no without some kind of procedure. Then that means that technically they should all have a standard where we expect to be able to support with our services those IADUs. Or we have 2 standards. One where in cases where we deny where the developer doesn't have to put that in, or they don't have the lot size or whatever, that's one standard. And then those who has to allow IADUs, that's another standard. We could already see it. So, I mean, I know it's not our fault. This is something that was rushed through with the state, but I mean, it's obvious. If once the 25% is gone, where the developers can say no, then what's left is 75% that has to say yes. unless there's a mitigating circumstance, like the lot sizes are too small. But that means there has to already be 2 standards then, as far as road, sewer, water, all that stuff.
Is it
I mean, so
just
it's already
two
obvious.
standards, or would there be more levels of standards?
Well, yeah, but either way, it's either one that we can support or one that we don't have to support. You know, and so it just seems like, I mean, that's already there. And again, it's not the city's fault. It's, you know, and we're scrambling and all this, but otherwise, we're just kind of hoping that it goes away or hoping that we'll deal with it later. But the fact is, we already put the standards. We've already used up 17%. There's only 8% left. All that other stuff is potentially okay for, you know, ADUs. So that means we have to have the standards. And or what if a developer comes in today and says, yeah, we want that. So then what are we going to hold them up while we develop standards? I don't know. It's just it's sticky. It really is. Now, as far as what's on proposed, I think we do have to go with it. I mean, you know, with what we have today, we have to at least make the amendments so that we can continue to proceed. But yeah, I totally agree. I think we already know that there's going to be 75% that who can potentially be to have IADUs, in which case we have to have, instead of talking about do they meet the standards, we have to have the standards. So it's just a lot of work for you guys.
Thank you, Commissioner Kilgore. Commissioner Ryan.
I'll defer to Commissioner Barton because I've spoken a lot and I can speak after you if you'd like because we haven't heard from you yet.
I actually, exactly what Commissioner Kilgore was saying, like after the 8%, then what? The same thing that everybody's been saying, it makes you a little nervous about it because the 8% could happen in who knows when, right? It could happen in the next 2 years or it could happen, and then we have to have those in place saying, okay, now we've reached that 25%, so now we have to have these in place. It's not, yeah, so you said everything I was going to say, so thank you. That's it.
Yeah. Am I okay, Mr. Chair, then?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll be really quick. So I appreciate the conversation. I think a lot of times when we get into amendments and code, we sort of build ourselves a false sense of finality towards around all of it, right? I would agree with Ken that I do believe this is an appropriate initial step. We are essentially working our way through this because we can't predict the future. We can learn from the past and experience, which I think, Ken, we're grateful for what you've shared with us in terms of what you've seen or foresee. I do think that our legislature is dominated by developers, and there is a reason why they passed this. I think Commissioner McConkey hit on that reason, and I'll leave it at that because there's dollar signs involved. And I do think where we have established neighborhoods, I agree. I don't think we're going to see this crazy influx of, you know, all these new applicants coming and saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you." I tend to disagree a little bit. I don't think we'll see a lot of those neighborhoods that are established with a big change and a lot of applications for people wanting to see this. But I do feel with the current housing situation and the dollar signs involved that we will see developers come with these proposals and come because they can make more money. All of that being said, I do feel like this is a great step. I do feel like, again, I just want to remind the Planning Commission here that we may take this step as certainly probably not the last step we're going to take in the process. And whether that eases concerns or comfort or makes you less uneasy, that is certainly, it can go either way. The one quick question I did have, though, as far as language that I forgot to bring up earlier, Fred, is I wanted your take on the proposed language under the map amendment process under B. Ken, I don't know if you can pull that up. Is there a reason why we chose, it's just kind of an awkward wording phrase that says that were built under lesser than the current standards? Is there any reason why we couldn't just say prior to versus under lesser than?
To amend the map.
Lesser than meaning standards that don't meet our current level of requirement.
Well, and I just don't, that language is weird to me versus just saying prior to the current standards.
Below, yeah, I think we're not, because maybe they were built prior to but meet. So we're just saying any of those that somehow don't meet current standards.
Yeah.
I think that's the reason, is because it's not temporal. It's not related to time, related to the standard and whether or not it meets the standard. But that's kind of begs the question, why do we use the word current then?
Yeah.
I mean, so, but I think that below the current standard is probably what was intended there.
We can change that if that sounds better.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I had two questions that came from a neighbor, and it's kind of out, it's along the IADUs, but it's kind of a little bit outside what we were looking at here. They were wondering about how do we, where we remove the neighbor or the relative, how are we determining the number of people that can live in a house now? I remember something that was said that has to do with health and safety standards. How do we determine the health and safety standards? David?
Well, per household, it's how we define a family. And the current definition of family is basically unlimited if they occupy it as a single housekeeping unit.
Okay.
How do you prove a single housekeeping unit? Do you go barge in and, are you guys all cooking together, eating together? I don't know. But that's what our definition of a family is there is no number as long as they occupy it as a single housekeeping unit.
Okay. And the other thing is how, if we have people that are elderly that have live-in help, they don't really count as an ADU, right? They're not renting from the person?
If it's family, that's a mother-in-law apartment, that wouldn't be considered an ADU.
But it's like a hired person that's come in that they're hiring to help them, that may live with them. The resident is paying the person to live there, basically.
Yeah, some sticks in my head about
Domestic help.
live-in care.
It wouldn't be part of an ADU, right?
No, it wouldn't, because it's, again, they're meeting the same single housekeeping unit.
Okay. That's all I have. I'll entertain a motion unless we have any other comments.
Can I throw one thought out there before
Sure.
anyone makes a motion? I know this is, try not to make this too brutal. Is it feasible? And I'm focused on the non-HOA subdivisions because that's fits more my style, right? Is it feasible to, rather than make a change in the status on those non-HOA subdivisions, is it feasible to put it up for a vote this fall? Before we did that, we retain the current status and put it up for vote and let the public determine. And we list each of the subdivisions, although that might be challenging.
Can I give you a quick thought, Commissioner McConkey? Because when you raised that earlier, I thought about that. And this coming from City Council they're the ones that are held accountable, right, to the public. So I think either way, it is going up for a vote. So if we approve what's here and then there's this major outcry or whatnot, then they're the ones that ultimately they'll have that vote right before them, and people that they represent in those neighborhoods have that opportunity, I think, to respond to that action from them. That's when you said that earlier, I kind of thought through that process, and I thought ultimately that this.
Then it would be a matter of publicity.
Yeah.
We just need to get on social media, and there's a lot of education. So, yeah, I like freedoms, and when there's a perceived freedom, I don't like the freedom taken without some reasoning. So that's my thought. Anyway.
Just ask a clarifying question. So when we vote for approval or recommend our recommendation, it's the map amendment process and then the development requirements for the new development areas, and then also the revised IAD map?
So all you would need to say is approving the amendment of section 192004, including the map amendments and those text amendments. I didn't say that correctly, but it would be in relation to that particular section.
So that, but the change in the map is something we are approving or not approving?
Yes.
A recommendation.
Right, yeah, recommendation, sorry.
Mr. Chair, if appropriate, I'd like to make a motion. Based on the evidence and explanations received today, I move to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for the proposed amendment to Title 19 with the findings and conditions in the staff report dated April 5th, 2022.
We have a motion from Commissioner Ryan. the city attorney rang in, so I'm going to let him
Oh,
speak.
sorry,
before-
I jumped the gun
I'm
there.
sorry, I was just going to say it's all combined together, all the amendment and the map right now.
So by motioning with the staff report, right, that's what I
Yep,
essentially assumed,
exactly.
that it's all together.
You just
now.
did it all, yeah.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Ryan. Do we have a second? I think I heard one.
I'd like to, if it's okay with you, Commissioner Ryan, to retain the Jacobs Ranch subdivision, if that would be fitting, to retain the current status, simply because I'm familiar with that subdivision. I'm not familiar with the other non-HOA subdivisions. I don't know what they can accommodate. Where it's got wider street widths, I recognize the other infrastructure is unknown.
Would we have to make another motion
Are
to
you-
finish this one?
I might.
Yeah, are you proposing a?
Well, we need a second first, and then we can do a question on the motion, right?
second.
Okay.
So we have Commissioner Anderson second the motion, and we're having a question on the motion from Commissioner McConkey. You want to amend the map?
I would like to, yeah, I would propose to include in that amending the map to retain the current status of IADU approved in the entire Jacobs Ranch development.
So it's currently not approved, and you want to change it to approved?
Currently, it is approved, right? But the current map is wanting to take it back to,
No.
that's my understanding. Yeah. Everything on the west side of